Okay guys, welcome to Border View Farms. We're going to do a special one today. We are going to do a grain bin tour. We're going to do part one here at Waldron at our main farm. This is our main grain handling facility. We have a second one at our farm about 35 miles east of here in Berkey. We'll go do part two of this video down there this afternoon, but we'll start here with a little bit of an overview. So this is our grain system and setup here. We've got two grain legs. Those legs have a belt in them, rubber belt with buckets on it that carry grain up to the top, dump it into the distributors, where then there's pipes that take it to each individual bin. We have a grain handler dryer there. We'll look at that there in a second, and then all of our various grain bins, and then a few that we have out back there that are not hooked up to the grain system. So we'll start at the pit, and I'll show you kind of the path that the grain takes. We'll talk about corn because that's what we use the grain system for the most, and we'll go through it here. So obviously you guys have seen as we've been dumping some beans and trucks in here, we pull in through our pit here, which is a straight shot off of our driveway. Works really good. We don't have a huge pit, but we've got enough here that we can dump trucks relatively quickly. It is a 15-inch U-trough auger underneath that pit that conveys the grain or augers the grain over here to the leg. It dumps in through the transition down here into the boot of the leg. This leg then takes it up to the top. This is a 8,000 bushel an hour leg. All of the downspouts coming off of that distributor are 12-inch diameter downspouts. And so with corn, the way that this works is we will dump our corn here, augers it into the leg, goes up the leg, and then you'll notice, that one of our downspouts there has a Y valve in it, right there. One of the pipes from that Y comes down here to our dryer. The other one goes over to the wet bin. The wet bin is the one there where we put all of our indicator lights on earlier this summer. Basically what happens is when the dryer is full, it overflows, it fills up that pipe, overflows into the wet bin and fills the wet bin. So most of our corn is going to go that direction. It's going to go into the wet bin, and then as our dryer calls for corn, says, hey, I'm empty or getting low, you need to fill me up, this auger kicks on. This is the unload auger for that wet bin, and it goes back up this leg. The leg runs all the time, and then it goes down that same hole in the distributor, but this time it goes to the dryer because it's not full, so it's not overflowing back into that bin. And then this is the dryer, so all the corn's going to funnel through this dryer. I will climb up here and show that to you a little bit closer. This is a 2412, I believe, or 10 or 12. Grain handler dryer. Means it's 24 feet long, and it's what they call a mixed flow dryer. So in the center of it here, there is a center column, and all the fans are down underneath. There's 6 fans. There's one of them. Centrifugal fans. They blow air up through the center column. Here is the burner. Burns the whole length of this thing. Big old fire. Gets it nice and hot, blows the heat up through the center, and then the air goes out through these triangles. These are kind of vents that are open to the grain column. So between this wall and the outside here, it's 2 foot thick, and that fills up with corn, with grain, both sides. So there's 2 columns, one on each side. And there you'll notice all of the triangles on the outside. Well, those triangles are not the same ones that are open on the inside. See these rivets right here is the flashing for the vent, the triangle that's open to the inside. And so what happens is that hot air gets blown all the way up through there, through all the triangles, all the way up to the top. And they go into that one. And then the air has to go down through the corn, and it exhausts out these triangles on the outside. So that air is constantly moving through that corn, and the corn kind of funnels down through here almost like a plinko board all the way out through the bottom. Here now you can see all those fans and motors, all 6 of them. When the corn gets to the bottom, if you look up in there, we've got some covers that are open here, but you can kind of see how those vents open to one side. I don't know if I hold this up there, maybe you can see them open to the inside there. But then right here, we have our metering rolls. They run the entire length of the dryer. There are 4 of them, 2 on each side. And they spin sort of slowly and let the grain fall out. And so they meter out the corn or the grain or whatever, and it falls into this. This is a drag conveyor. That drag conveyor drags that corn all the way down to this end. You'll see here's the other drag for the other grain column, and they dump it into this cross drag. This cross drag then dumps into our dry leg. The dry leg is much smaller. It is only 3,500 bushel an hour capacity. It is taller, however. It's 120 foot tall. Our big leg is 100 foot tall. And it's taller because we needed the height to basically to reach the pipes going from the other leg. So from back here again, you will notice that the pipes on their tall leg, the dry leg, don't actually go to the bin. When we put it up, we just coped them into the pipes that are already going to the bin from the other leg. It saved us a lot of cost in piping and materials. And so that's how we tied it in there. That leg, I think those are only 8-inch downspouts up there because it doesn't run the capacity. It's only ever going to run as fast as our dryer runs. We're never dumping into that one from the pit. So after corn comes out of our dryer, goes up the dry leg, down into the pipes, most of it is going to end up in our big bin in the back there. It does so via that pipe that ends up in the grain cannon, double run conveyor there, that starts on the top of the bin that we're putting beans in. That drags it all the way up to the top of our big bin. Well, let's go up there. So we've got these nice catwalks to get up, steps most of the way, but here we're on the top of our bean bin. You can see the bottom of our double run conveyor, and it runs up to the top of our big bin here. So all the way up to the top, and then it dumps it down into the top of this bin. Oh, it's a long climb up here. I believe this bin, the peak here, to be about 75 feet off the ground. And there's our Christmas star. Gonna need some attention, it appears. Yeah, we'll get to that. These are just vents you can see in there. You can see we got another one of those distributors, just like the other bin. We left this up enough for future expansion plans. If we ever need it, we have room for another one of those bins right there. I don't anticipate that happening, not anytime soon at least, but you never know, so we planned for it. We'll pause the tour to get a look at our bean field out here. Looks nice. Corn is turning brown really quickly over there. You can see the corn plot out there behind my seed warehouse. There's one number that really stands out pretty green yet, a couple of them. And you can kind of see the bean plot, some of the variation through the other stuff there. And from this angle, you can see that distributor on the top of our dry leg and those pipes, how they kind of cope into where all the other pipes are going. And you can also see that Y valve right there. Comes out of one hole, will go down that pipe to the dryer. Once that pipe fills up, builds up, overflows that way into the wet bin. There is a gate on that valve that we can close and push stuff into the wet bin if we need to without it going back into the dryer. We basically will use that when we're filling the wet bin with dry corn at the end of the year. So that big bin that we were just coming down off of, that is a 120,000 bushel bin. It is 54 foot diameter, 14 rings tall. This bin here that we're climbing down right now, this is a 42 foot diameter. I believe it to be a 10 ring bin. It holds about 45,000 bushels. That one right behind us that we're putting beans in, 42 foot diameter 9 ring bin, holds about 40 to 42,000. Our wet bin over there is a 21 foot diameter. It's pretty small diameter, 11 rings tall, and it holds, I think, 12,000 bushels. Our other bin over here, which we're going to talk about, is a 30 foot GSI. That's actually a top dry bin. I'll explain that in a second. And it holds about 20,000 bushels. We have an almost exact duplicate of that bin at our farm in Berkey. So let's talk about this GSI top dry and how it works. Basically, this is another dryer. This is how we dried corn before we had the big grain handler dryer. We actually had a Stormore bin that was almost identical to it, and we're gonna have to climb up there to talk about it. Okay, so the way we dry grain is by blowing hot air through it, right? That's how we do it with the grain handler. Well, this one is the same. We dry corn or grain by blowing hot air through it. And so what this says is there's a false floor up here that's perforated, and it's got these chutes on the bottom, and there's some up there that have pans underneath that we can crank up and hold corn up here. So we can fill this top ring all the way up. It'll hold about 1,500 bushels. And then you'll notice we have a duct with a giant fan down there, and that fan blows hot air up and puts it into the bin right below this false floor, which then blows the heat up right through all of the perforations through the grain, and then it exhausts out the top and these roof vents. So that's how it dries the corn. And this is a batch dry, so we put 1,500 bushels in there. We run the burner for 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it takes, drop it, fill it back up, do it again. You will also notice that on the top of this bin, John Deere has a Starfire receiver up here. That is RTK receiver for our RTK signal. It's a dealer network. They put that there. They've got cabling then that runs down into our grain shed down there. And then there's a big tall antenna you can see sticking up back there. That's the repeater for the RTK network. Okay, so we're gonna put beans in that bin, already have. The rest of them will all have corn up here. So the big bin, that storage bin, these two will end up with dry corn in them by the end of the year. And that's how that works. So then we need to get grain back to the leg, right? Because we've got to get it out of here somewhere. So how do we load out? Well, we have an overhead bin. That bin holds 3,000 bushels. It's on a superstructure, so we can drive our trucks right under it. There's a gate on the bottom. We open it up and fill a truck. We can load trucks in 5 minutes, in and out. It's easy, they're quick. That bin holds enough for 3 truckloads. But in order to get the corn into there, we got to go back through our wet leg, our big leg. So we've got unload augers that dump into it directly or via the pit. Everything over here comes back through the pit. So that bin obviously is that unload that dumps in the end of it down here. The bean bin has a pit that unloads into there. And then for the big bin, we've got an unload auger and then a drag conveyor that's angled up, and it just dumps right into the top of it here. While we're over here, we'll talk about water a little bit. We have natural tile, well, I shouldn't say natural tile, but we have a tile drain system here. Very, very rarely will we get water build up in that pit. I've seen it happen, but it's very rare, so we don't really fight water issues too bad. We have good drainage. Where our farm sits, we are on the high ground. We're at the top of the watershed, and it falls quite a bit towards the river as you get a couple miles away. In fact, just from where we're standing to the low ground out there where the tile goes and then eventually heads out to the north through a county main, I think there's 15 feet of fall. So the water gets away. We don't really fight that too much, which is why we're okay with having a pit and having legs sit down below the grade and not all on the surface like the dry leg is. So that's our main system. You can see we've got these catwalks on the side of the superstructure for opening and closing the gate. We had a Y valve up there. We used to have pigs when we first put that in back in the 90s. We had pigs and we would grind feed out of there, so we had a tube that would drop down to the side so we could get it at ground level a little bit easier to fill our feed grinder at the time and stuff. We got out of pigs a long time ago. Everything has been upgraded since then, but that superstructure basically. Let's see, this bin here's a Butler bin that was put up in, I want to say 98. It is the oldest one still sitting here. These two here are GSI bins, the dryer and the wet bin. They were put up in 2006. That soup cup bin was put up in 2012. And the big soup cup bin, I want to say was 2016 or 17. I don't remember exactly. The dryer a year later, and this will be the 4th year with this dryer. 3rd or 4th year. I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to look, I guess. But we're really happy with that system. It works really well. The big leg was put up in 2010. We had an older a 3,000 bushel an hour leg before that just wasn't big enough to keep up with capacity. We also over here have some smaller bins. Those two there are 21-foot diameters. I think they hold about 7,000 bushels apiece. They actually used to sit where those two bins are now. In 2006, when we wanted to upgrade our drying and we put it in the GSI dryer, top dry there, we got a crane. We picked those two bins up from over there, swung them around, and set them on their new pads over here. I wish I was doing YouTube videos back then. That would have been a cool thing to film. So, and then this is a 30-foot diameter Brock bin that we bought used and put up. I want to say it holds 9 or 10,000 bushels, something like that. Maybe a little more. I'm not sure. We have wheat in those two. This one is empty right now. Sometimes we put beans in it. Sometimes we put corn in it. Sometimes we put wheat in it. Depends on what we want to store. Probably going to get corn this year if we have the need for it. So that's the bins. You'll notice over here we have a big propane tank that feeds our burners on our dryers. It is a 18,000 gallon propane tank, so we can bring in transport loads of propane and get a little bit better deal. Depending on the fall and how many loads we need. So this fall I don't anticipate our corn being very wet. Hopefully we'll be able to dry stuff relatively cheap and it'll go fast and we won't need as much propane. Last year I think we brought in, well, last year we didn't have very many corn acres, so we didn't get that many, maybe 1 or 2 loads, but in a wet year with a lot of corn, we could go through 4 or 5 semi-loads of propane. All right, so now let's cover electrical. We have a very complex electrical system here, and the first thing you're going to notice is big generator. So we used to power our grain system with the generator that we used for irrigation. We bought this one here a year ago. It's a Cummins motor, Cummins genset, and it used to be a backup generator at a banking center in a town north of here a ways, a city, and it had like 300 hours on it when we bought it a year ago. What's it now? 1,435 hours. So it's sort of old. I think it's a 2003, but it had almost no hours, and for what we use it for, it's perfect. So we do run 480 volt 3-phase on most everything, but we actually have 3 different completely separate electrical systems, and we'll kind of talk about them here. So this little shed here, this is our 480 volt 3-phase stuff. We've got a big breaker panel right here that's got all the breakers in it. We then got motor starters and disconnects out here for some of those big motors. Let's see, the pit, both legs, the dryer, well, both dryers, and some of the unload motors are all on 480 volt 3-phase. So this fan has a 40 horse 3-phase motor in it. The big leg has a 40 horse motor on it. The pit has, I believe, it's either a 10 or a 15 horse. The dryer has 6 15 horse motors on it. The dry leg, I believe, has a 20 horse motor on it. So there's it takes a lot of electrical capacity to run that, and that's why we bought the generator. So back in 2006, when we put the GSI dryer up and we had that 40 horse motor, we knew we couldn't run it with single phase electric, which is what we had run everything with up to that point. We have 400 amps single phase service coming in off the power line. That's all we can get here, because you see that soybean field over there? That's Ohio. We're the last place on the line. It ends right there. That's it. And so we can't get any more power from them. We asked back then about getting 3-phase power brought in. They just told us flat out $100,000 a mile. Fine, it's 2.5 miles away. We're not going to pay $250,000 to bring 3-phase electric in here and then have to pay higher electric rates on top of it. That's why the generator. Well, so at the time, back in 2006, I should back up. Before that, we decided, well, we'll just put phase converters in. So back here, we have 2 rotary phase converters that convert single phase electric into 3-phase electric. And so this is our big 3-phase electric panel off of the electric system, the grid, 240 volt 3-phase. And we feed that into our grain shed here. So when we initially put that in, all it ran was that dryer. I think then in 2010 when we upgraded the grain leg and we put that 40 horse motor in, we started to run our leg and that dryer off of the phase converters, and we pretty quickly realized we didn't have enough power. We were overloading our system. We were tripping our main breaker for the whole farm, the 400 amp main breaker, and so that was when we made the decision to buy a generator, and we started doing that. So here's kind of our three-phase 240 volt panel that splits everything out, and I'm not gonna be able to open that with one hand. But basically, we've got we've taken most everything off of that now. The burner on the big GSI dryer does not run off that anymore. Very little does. But what we don't want to run off of our generator is our aeration fans, because they run 24/7, and so we don't want the generator to have to run 24/7 just to run a fan. So we still use our phase converters for that. So that's what's running off of this. The fans for the 30-foot GSI bin, the 21-foot GSI wet bin, and all three of the big bins out there. Basically all the aeration fans for this grain setup here runs on three-phase 240 volt off the electric grid, not the generator. We also then still have a single-phase 240 110 volt system. That's mostly lights and electrical outlets, control panel for the dryer, that kind of stuff. There are no actual motors that are running off of the 110 240 circuit. So that's how that works. Obviously, I've shown you guys our moisture tester. We got my record-keeping computer. This is our controller for the dryer master on the grain handler dryer. I'll show you this more when we get into corn and how all of that works. Over here we've got some stuff. This is the box for the John Deere, the RTK. The other one is internet service through wireless internet people that have stuff up on our leg as well. Look at that, sun's gonna come out. So that's this grain facility. Any questions and comments, leave them down below. I'll be sure and answer them. I think I have covered everything. We've got what we call our block shed here that we were in. That's our little test shack. My dad built that back in I think in the 80s, early 90s. This system has gone through some major upgrades and changes over really the last 10, 15 years. But ever since I was a kid, I mean, they were building the Stormore top dry that used to sit where the grain handler is now back in 1986 when I was born. Dad tells me he went from working on the bin to the hospital. So, you know, it's a continuous thing of improving grain setups and systems and all of that, and we've done a lot over the last 10, 15 years. Like I said, I don't see any more major upgrades or things changing anytime soon, but you never know. There's always a few things. We could pour a little concrete and clean some stuff up and that kind of stuff, but for the most part, it works pretty good. We do have, like I said, spot over here for planned upgrade, second big bin. We've got room for another 54-foot diameter bin, a twin to that one, if we ever decide that we need it. One other thing I did not talk about, we do have a side draw on this bin. That's kind of why we put this driveway around back here. It's nice for parking equipment out of the way and stuff, but we can get trucks under there and side draw load right out of that bin with no motors, no power, no nothing, just fill trucks straight out of it. So that's pretty handy. We've only used that once or twice, I think, or 1 year, because last year we didn't have enough corn in here to use it. Here's the other end of this bin with the unload and the drag going back to the pit, and I'll open this door up and show you the inside. It is massive. We do have another grain spreader at the top of this bin. You can see on the side the baffles for the side draw over there, and a power sweep in here as well. And man, I tell you what, we have more brooms laying around this place than I know what to do with. You'll also notice the cables. I think you can see those cables hanging in this bin. Those are temperature sensor cables, and they help us detect the quality of the grain and look for any hot spots that we may have when the bin is full. Last thing you want is your bin heating up and causing problems with grain going out of condition. So all of these bins have a sump in the middle there. You will pull corn out of that sump until nothing comes out of it, and then you can use these side gates here to empty one side of it where the power sweep is, and then that sweep kind of goes around and helps draw everything back to the center is how they unload. All right, well, that's going to do it for here. Let's head to Berkey, part 2. Okay, so I did film a part 2 to this video for our grain system tour down to Berkey. However, this one was already 25 minutes long, and that one's another 10 minutes. So we're going to split it into 2 separate videos. I'm going to end this one here. Like I said, any questions and comments, leave them down below. And then look for part 2 grain bin tour of our Berkey facility to come out tomorrow morning. So have a great night, everybody.